What's going on, guys? Salted Neos here, back from his 2-month-long extinction. And with the first deck I've had in a while that actually feels like does something. Been a while since I had one of those, hence the lack of profiles. But we're doing Attic Nester today because turns out this deck still is really fun and it does stuff, which it's getting me results, which is what really matters at the end of the day in terms of getting on the channel. So we're starting off with our 3 Picari, wow, nice blunder already. A Chi-Chi Agnister. This is the Monster Searcher and one of your starters. On summon, it adds a level 4 lower Agnister to hand, which is pretty sick. And then it has some really dumb effect where it banishes itself from the grave to pop the monster that is your monster in battle. And then we've got our 3 Picari. Picari is another starter. It searches the spell and traps, so you can search I Meet You with this. Use it to search I Meet You, and from there you can just basically do the same combo, because you use I Meet You to search Doyon, which is here at 2 copies. But if you had to start with Picari, use it to search a Chi-Chi instead, and then a Chi-Chi will just search Doyon. So you end up getting to the same monsters. But yeah, good ratios on this. Picari Spell Trap Searcher. This will take a monster back from the grave on summon, and if it's used as a link material, it grabs an Ice Spell or Trap back, which is pretty nice. You remember to actually do that. You get 2 chances in the combo to remember. I typically tend to remember on the second one. So, yeah, that's a thing. And then we got our 1 Baruru, which is used in combo as well for Cyber's Wicked Search. Cyber's Wicked will search it, and then this thing will send the Negate, which is Danmari, to the grave. And then when using it as a synchro material, it'll revive the other material, which is typically Doyon, which is where you get the second chance to resolve the effect on. Doyon's effects are once per turn, though, of course, like all of these. And then Danmari is a negate in the grave, and you almost never use its other effects. But you need to control Link 6, but your combo ends on Link 6 anyway, and your deck is pretty resilient in getting back to that Link 6. And for the extenders, we have the last 2 Agnister monsters, 1 Hayari and 1 Gachiri. So Hayari just summons itself, you control an Agnister, and Gachiri will negate the effects of a Cyber's effect monster on the field to summon itself. They both have different uses. You can run the Earth one as well, but this guy can just come out with any Cyber, so it's harder to search. I think that's better. I personally prefer that. Because I honestly don't even remember offhand how you'd end up searching this. Because I'm pretty sure everything that could search it searches level 4 or lower. So that's probably a reason to run the other guy. But, I don't know. I typically just search Hayari anyway. And having Gachiri to come up later in the game when you have a non-Ignister Cybers monster out during a comeback play or something, I think it's better to have that than it is to have a second one of the ones that requires you to have a non-Ignister. So onto the hand traps. Got our 3 copies of good old Ash. 2 Effect Failure, which I'll get to. This probably should be 3, but I'm still learning a line that will let me cut the card that I'm running. That will let me cut a different hand trap. We got our Gamut package. And the hand trap I probably should cut once I learn the line, but Nibiru, I'm pretty I've heard there's a line that you can play to get around Nib, but I still don't know that line. Not gonna lie, I'm still learning the deck. But I've been using Nib as a crossout target instead because it's probably going to be better to have. I think it's better to have it there than not while I'm still learning the line. Then when I know the line, I can cut Nib. I'm pretty sure the line needs an extender anyway, which at that point, if I'm running crossout, run the 1 Nib. In some cases, you can even use it while you have a rival Cyber Sub because it's unaffected. You just got to make sure the token won't beat over it. And then for the remaining hand traps, we got our 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. So, a bunch of monster negates, basically. Onto the spells and traps. We got the cards that can all search. So we got our 3 Signet Minings to search into the starters. 3 Small World because the Ignister monsters are very good at using it, and you can just get back into the ones that you want to see. And the Searcher you don't typically want to start with is I Meet You. You can still work with it, starting with it, but it's used during a lot of your combos. And honestly, I'm still learning the line to use to get around if you had to use that to start your combo. And for more Ice Spell and traps, we got our 3 copies of Ignister Island. It's searched by you search it off the link 1, but you kind of want to bait them into. You want to use that link 1 to bait a lot of the time. So you want to have access to it. And speaking of wanting to have access to it, you have terraforming as well. And having too many of them isn't typically too big of an issue because of this card, eye contact. So if you have 2 field spells, you get to go +1, which is pretty cool. And for the last Ice Spell and Traps, we have one Fighting Spirit and one Idle Reborn, which are both Monster Reborn effects, which is pretty cool. And for the remaining spells, we have our two Pot of Desires, which you can usually play pretty well. Banishing Baruru is about the worst thing that can happen to you, but like it's not too bad. You can still usually get around it just fine, so it's workable. You just rather not. And for me personally, I'm running 3 Crossout and 1 Called By because I'm still learning how you play around hand traps in this deck normally. Not the best reason to run a card, but I own it, so for now it's been holding up. And to the extra deck. And typical Salted tokens. With pause, because that's cat. So the Ignister monster's in here. We got one Arrival Cyberse, our big boss monster. It's unaffected by everything else, and you typically summon it with 4,000 attack. A lot of this deck ends up going back to the same line, which is why I like it so much, because I don't have to remember a million different backup lines. Aside from the ones I still need to learn about the hand traps, but even then, I've been kind of just winging it back to at least a 3K version of this. And if I don't end on this, I just end on Decode Talker Heat Soul instead, because you get draws and you get more chances to get better plays next turn. You got our 2 Dark Infant. You do want to run it at 2, despite the fact that you typically wouldn't, because this thing ends up both for follow-up turn, because you need to get monsters out of your main monster zones, and because this thing, having a second one, can potentially let you get this guy to 6,000 instead of 4,000. If you have an extender that is not a Monster Reborn spell. We got our 1 Dark Templar, because also really important for the deck. It puts your bodies out to get the last push to get to Arrival Fibers. And for the non-link at Ignisters, we got 1 Winged Pegasus, which is also summoned during combo, because you can just get it's just a free spin in the grave if something dies. And a lot of people aren't running this card, but I am, Light Dragon. I've been seeing people run like 2 Axis Code Talkers, and honest to God, I just don't want to get a second Axis Code Talker just for this deck. So I've been using Light Pegasus, because Light Pegasus allows you to use I Meet You later in the game to get to Picari if you need it, which comes up occasionally, especially if you used your Heat Soul already. Speaking of which, Heat Soul, this card's awesome. But this guy also has like it also pops monsters on the field, which is cool, and it has a battle phase effect, which has come out more times than I'd like to admit, which is kind of neat. Heat Soul just draws a bunch of cards, and you're running it because Fire Phoenix is bad, and this is good, and it's an I Meet You target, which, that's a thing. The 2300s that are I Meet You targets right here. Technically Axis Code Talker, but don't use Axis Code Talker for I Meet You unless you absolutely have to. You even have one for Earth, technically, because it's a Transcode Talker here, which we'll get to. We got our 1 Cyberse Wicked, which is used during combo to get a Cyberse Tuner, and then you use it to make a Splash Mage. And we got our 2 Splash Mage. You run a second because you typically use it in follow-up turns a lot, so it's nice to have it there. Security Dragon, this thing comes up a lot too, both because it can bounce stuff and it can get non-Cyberses off the field if you got like Nib tokened or you summon something like a hand trap, something like that, which is neat. 1 Link Spider, which is part of the Nib line, which I'm honestly still learning, but I'm having it in here because I might as well have the spot occupied. And I think I've been able to do it with an extender. I don't know if you can do it without an extender, though. So, for now, it's in here. It definitely should be staying in here, too. Transcode Talker, which we were just talking about, is another I Meet You target. I just use the Revive effect a lot in backup lines, because it just gets you it gets the Splash Mage back, and then you just need one other monster to go to Arrival Cybers. But it's also nice in in trying to push for game, just like our good friend Axis Code Talker here, which I don't need to go into. It is more important. Like a lot of the time, I'd say something along the lines of, "Oh, Boral Sword's probably fine," but you're locked into Cybers a lot in this deck, so you kind of do need an Axis Code Talker. Unfortunately, it comes up way too much to not run, and I don't even know what you'd replace it with. And to round things off, we got our 1 Update Jammer, which the funny story with this guy, I ended up taking a game off the effect that resets the attacks on the field, but that's neither here or there. It's probably the one I go into the least, but it allows you to get double attacks from what you summon. I guess that's what some people would replace with Axis Code Talker, but it's already in here, so yeah. Just don't try and use the level 1 with it, because that's illegal, and I nearly lost, and I tried to do that at one point like an idiot before I read the card again. And the side deck, we got our 3 Lancias for Flunderies, basically. And Sword Soul to some extent, but I don't think it hits them as hard. Got our the remaining 2 Nibs, because, Nib, sure. Got our 3 Twin Twister, our 2 Cyclone, 1 Feather Duster, and a red reboot. There was a mine epidemic going on around my locals when I started building this, and I really should take out the some of this stuff so I can actually put other side cards in again, but neither here or there. And to round it off, we got our 3-dimensional bears because it's Despia format, and I'm pretty sure every locals has a bunch of Despia right now. Alright, so last thing we're going to do is show you how this thing ends on the Arrival Cybers. So we normal summon the Picari, use the Picari effect to add I Meet You, and then link it off for Dark Infant. Dark Infant's effect is going to add the field spell, which you will activate. The good thing about this field spell I didn't even mention, but it can recur itself if it gets popped. Which, if people don't read the card, they waste resources on it, and it's really funny because you just make it again. Anyway, you're going to use I Meet You, and because we started with Picari, we're going to reveal Decode Talker Heatful, which means we're going to take 2300 in the end phase, because, well, you're not going to summon it. Not this time, anyway. There is a way to summon it. Tell me in the comments that if you can get it to summon it with the same end board. But here's what I know, so we're just going to go with it. A Chi-Chi, which you're going to special summon off Ignister Island, and activate the effect to grab a Doyen. Link these guys off for Wicked. You use the Ignister Island effect to summon Doyen. You're going to use Cybers Wicked as Chainlink 1, and you're going to banish Dark Infant as cost. And Chainlink 2 Doyen to add back the one that you didn't special summon off Ignister Island because you need it later. So grab Picari back, and then add Baruru. It's important to do it this way because if you don't do it this way, you're going to end up with a problem of not being able to summon something under the Dark Templar. So you kind of do need to do it. Why am I shuffling the deck? Link 2, now it's going to be a pain to search through, but whatever. We're going to bring out a Splash Mage. And we're going to use the Ignister Island effect to summon Baruru, who is going to immediately send Danmari to the grave. And now you're going to use the Splash Mage's effect to revive the Doyen. And you're going to Synchro Summon, because it's basically free to do it here, for Wind Pegasus. And then Baruru's effect is going to bring back the Doyen. If there are spell and traps to remove, do it now. Don't do it before. Baruru resolves. And you see how I was talking about forgetting to resolve Doyen's effect? I should have done it when it was linked off to make the Splash Mage in the first place, but I typically forget until now. So we're going to link 3. If I remember earlier, I always do it on the first one. But I tend to remember on the second one for some reason. Dark Templar. Now the Doyen's effect is going to grab back the I Meet You. Now, if you had an extender, which I'll show you in a second, but we're going to go for the normal route, which is special summoning the Picari, which triggers the Dark Templar effect. To revive a Chi-Chi and Baruru specifically, it matters because the attributes need to be different to summon the big guy. So you're just going to make the big guy at 4,000 attack with a pop. The pop spell speed 1. So it's basically just having a negation. You have the I Meet You back and you have the rest of your hand. Now, if we go back a second to this moment, if you have either of the extenders, I'll grab Hayari because this is the one you can typically search during it if you have an opportunity to. You can go a little bit further here. So you special summon this off the island still because this is the best chance to do it. Then you just link it off here instead to make the infant. That'll trigger Dark Templar because something was summoned to its zones, which you can then chain infant, moving it over, and then turn it into a divine attribute. Yeah, you just pick divine because otherwise because there's no reason to not, it's just less confusing. In this case, you could also call it Earth, I guess, but just call Divine. It makes more sense. It's going to be less, you're going to never have an issue by calling Divine. So anyway, then that gets summoned over there, and then the Dark Templar will revive the monsters for its effect, so it'll bring back these 3. That is 5 monsters with different attributes, so you need a 6th, which will be the Hayari, which now means you can just make a Rival Cybers with 6,000 attack instead of 4,000 attack. And then you have the I Meet You in hand for next turn. And then you take burn damage, because this line ended up using Decode Talker Heat Soul as the target, so you're going to be at 5,700. If you know a way to summon Decode during this line, let me know. Just make sure it doesn't end up preventing the line from getting to Arrival Cybers, of course. But anyway, we're done with this. Thanks for watching my meme profile, and have a good one.